Hello there, and welcome. Today's video is going to be all about Africa and the changes that have been made to Africa with the newest DLC, as well as what future content that I believe should be implemented and the like. So, starting out with what's been changed in the new God or Damarung DLC, they've put a pretty big focus on West Central Africa, this area right here. So, with the Belgian Congo receiving a new focus tree, which we won't be discussing today in this video, but will be talked about in depth eventually, they've completely reworked a lot of the region. So, starting out, they've added a few new releasable tags with the state of Katagana, the kingdom of Barotsland, the Sokoto Caliphate, and the Edo Kingdom of Benin. Now, interestingly, the Sokoto Caliphate is not part of the Africa decolonized. So when I did the preset where I decolonized Africa to get the map to look like this, the Edo Kingdom was actually like independent on its own, but the Sokoto Kingdom was still part of Nigeria, so I had to manually release myself as them. So that's interesting. I don't know if that's just an oversight or if it's just making it a little bit more secret, but just a little interesting tidbit I saw. Moving over with these, they actually, I believe all four have their own unique leader, with the Sokoto Caliphate having a Sultan of Sokoto who gives some war support, justify war gold time, daily unaligned. We have the Edo Kingdom of Benin who has its own unique portrait. No stats, but little flag with a guy getting decapitated. Interesting. The state of Katagana has its own unique portrait, but no traits. And then the kingdom of Barostland does have a spirit with stability, war support of 5%, then 10% defense on core territory, and daily support for unaligned 0.10. So all four do have unique leaders, which is very interesting because pretty much no countries in Africa besides like these starting nations have their own unique leaders. They did also give Rwanda and Burundi starting leaders with their respective monarchs, that when you're playing the Congo path, you can put them in charge of an independent Congo by doing the Regency Council over here, which is pretty interesting. I like that they are also, if you just release them, they are just their leaders. That's pretty good. And a little tidbit I did find that I didn't notice before, and it might have been here before, the Republic of Ghana has its own leader now, which kind of out of left field. I went through and checked. I do not think any other nation has its own unique portrait besides the four new releasables and such, which is pretty cool. Interestingly, South Africa gets a new leader when on the decolonized preset, which is something. I'm not sure why it does that, but it does. But they did give the Republic of Ghana a leader, which he actually has pretty decent traits of giving 5% attack on core territory, 10% defense, some drift defense, and minus 5% resistant target. It's actually pretty interesting that like they just gave him randomly a leader, because like they gave no nation surrounding him a portrait except for like the two releasables up here. Like Nigeria didn't get anything. Even states like Cameroon, Chad, Central African Republic, these nations actually got content with the new formable of Latin Africa, and yet somehow Ghana did get a leader. Speaking of the formable, that's one of the big things I'd like to talk about with this video. The formable nations and the impact they have on all of the African nations in specific today. So, with the new DLC, they gave us the United States of Latin Africa, which is a formable that allows Angola, state of Katagana, Congo, Leoville, the Congo, Burundi, Rwanda, Congo, Brazzaville, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Cameroon, Central African Republic, and Chad all have the decision to form it, and then they gain cores on every nation that I listed. So it's pretty much everything here, not including these guys. It's actually a very strong formable. I did very much enjoy playing my Congo run to get the Overlord over Belgium achievement. It was very fun. I put the Rwandan king in charge. I was going to go for a East Africa and Latin Africa. I didn't end up getting the East Africa. I did get the Latin Africa, but failed to get the East Africa, but I did get the achievement, so pretty fun. Now, interestingly, there was another little change with how the Mutapa Greater Zimbabwe formable. It has been changed. I actually had to restart this video because I was issuing some complaints, and from how it was previously worked, I was not aware it had been changed slightly. So I went through and made sure I didn't miss anything else. I believe I didn't miss anything else. But now, when you click the decision, you also get cores on Botswana and Zambia, which you did not get before. Before, you would get cores on South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, and these 4 countries would have access to said formable. And you wouldn't get cores on Namibia, but most cases you would be playing South Africa, who starts out with cores, so you would have cores here. But now, I believe, like before, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique could not get cores on Namibia. Now they actually do, which is pretty interesting. Now, Namibia itself actually can't form the nation, which is kind of interesting. But I believe when they talked about it, the tribes of like Namibia, like this, aren't really part of the Zulu, but they really kind of just got lumped in just because they are part of South Africa. Did a little quick tab switch over so you can see it. I'm now playing as Zambia, and now Zambia and as well as Botswana will both have access to this decision. This is actually one of the formables that got the new highlight feature, which I do like that new feature. I wish they'd add it to the rest of them. Hopefully they'll do that maybe in a war effort patch or whatever. It's not the biggest deal, but I really do like it because I actually was struggling with I have a save that I'll show in a little bit later for a point where I was forming Arabia. I forgot you needed these 2 states of Sudan to form Arabia, because in the tooltip it just says British like Arabian states and Egyptian states. I believe these count as Egyptian states, even though Egypt does not have a core on them. So I was struggling for a little bit, finally figured it out. But so that, if the highlight was there, would have been very nice, because it would have shown these are the 2 states I'm missing. Because I used the state transfer tool to annex every state the United Kingdom had. Granted, this was on a decolonized preset, so it didn't annex the Sudan states. And I'm like, why is this not working? Did they break this in the latest DLC? They in fact did not. I just forgot these 2 states were needed. But moving back to my point, now Zimbabwean Empire, you actually do require Namibia to form this, and you do get cores on it too. But with a little tag switching, we switch over. As you can see, Namibia does not have access to it, which I understand because like they're not part of the same, like as I said before, they're not part of the tribe, but you do get cores on it with whatever nation you use to form with it, which now includes Zambia, which is pretty interesting. And something else interesting I noticed is Zambia's 2 states now have the exact same population and almost the exact same resources, just slightly 2 more chromate. I'm not sure if before they had, what would it be, 1.3-ish, 1.4 million manpower, like population, or if they just literally copy the state, because it's the exact same number. They might have just divided the amount of people who they had in Zambia and 2 for the 2 states. I just thought that was interesting. If they copy and pasted it, because I don't remember if this state it would have had a lot of chromium, and like if they split the resources between the 2, or if in the population, or if they just copy pasted it, and now Zambia has a lot more population. I'm not sure, but that was something I also just noticed when I was clicking through all the states. But I really do like that they have improved the Mutapa formable. because it actually helps with the next thing I was going to talk about. Flipping over to this other save I have prepared, we can see all of the formidable nations in Africa and what they look like. Now, some of these are fighting for cores, like East Africa can core over here, and like Mutapa does have Namibia as a core, but I have every state that cannot gain extra cores as an independent country, and then I have roughly the other ones with most of their cores, like the Horn of Africa can integrate these territories, and there's a whole bunch of other things, but because there's overlap between some of the formidable nations, but we got that in general. And as you can see, there's a region that really has no content, and that is like the West Africa, right here down around the I guess it wouldn't be sub-Sahara, but it would be around. But you can see this region. There is nothing to do here, which is interesting because they added 2 new releasables as well as a new leader in this region, and there's really nothing you can do, including one of the 4, because you have Congo, you have, well, I guess you have Congo, you have Ethiopia, the Sultanate of Assa, Liberia, and South Africa. Those are your independent countries in Africa at the start of the game. And Liberia, one of the starting nations, has no way to do anything, which is kind of a shame, because you would think they would at least have something over here for do. This gives all of these countries absolutely nothing to do. We also see Sudan over here. While the northern Sudanese states, let's get that out of the way, can be cored by Arabia, and the Horn of Africa can core the Nile parts, Sudan itself cannot form any formable nation. If we go ahead and tag switch over, there's nothing they can do. They can't do anything. While some of the nations around them can gain some cores on the land, they're kind of just dead in the water. We also have a couple others. We have Djibouti, which, while the Horn of Africa can core, it itself cannot form the Horn of Africa, which is just a minor critique. Like, it can easily just be added to the whitelist that allows nations to form the Horn of Africa, and not to mention it's the worst of the ones that can, so it not having access isn't the biggest deal, but it is something I don't like. That pretty much I would like every country to be, like, if there's a formable in the region, it should probably have access to it, especially like this, the Horn of Africa. It is part of the Horn of Africa. It should be able to form it. It's a minor gripe, but it's there. Then moving down, we have Namibia, which can't do anything, but is cored by Mutapa, so I'm not as upset with that, because it's also cored by South Africa at the start of the game. So Namibia is one of the starting nations that I give it the least amount of value, strictly for that fact that it's already cored by a starting nation, and it can be cored by multiple other nations with a formable, so I'm not as concerned about it. And then Mallory, I believe that's how you say it, Mallory, I'm not sure. It can be cored by East Africa with this expansion to core. It's pretty much everything around this lake. I don't know what the lake's called, but it's pretty much you can core around this lake. So Mallory can be cored by East Africa. So I don't believe it, while giving it either the ability to be cored by Mutapa or to form East Africa, I would like for it to have access to one of these two, because it would make, well, just giving it access to Mutapa would make it Mutapa slightly stronger. I mean, it's 1.6 million manpower. It's nothing to sneeze at. So, like, giving it, and it would also make the borders look pretty nice. But Mutapa's already been improved once, and since they added Zambia, but they didn't add Mallory to it, I don't believe they're going to. But maybe giving it access to East Africa, because East Africa can be formed by Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi only. And now, with how And with how the game works currently, these three of the five, you can't actually release yourself at game start. That's something I'd like to see changed. I understand why Paradox has it working that way, where you can't just release puppets for certain nations because it's tied to their focus paths. But it kind of limits it because, like, with right now, it's like the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union that have this issue, where there's nations inside of them you would want to play as sometimes, but you can't release yourself as them. I think the best middle ground would be you could release yourself and you have to click the play as button to release them. If not, you can't release them. You can't make them as puppets, and you can't make them as puppets. You can't leave them as independent to make buffer states, but you can play as them. I believe that would be a fair compromise, but that's neither here nor there. But as we can see, there is nothing in this region, so making a formable in this region, I believe, would be the most important for the game. Not necessarily game, but with more changes to Africa, I believe this would be the top priority I have, because presumably with the next DLC, Arabia is going to get a rework, and Arabia covers all of North Africa. There's also El Andalus, which, as you can see, this has the El Andalusian cores. I just released the nation, then annexed it over so I could have Arabia, because Arabia has these two cores that El Andalus does not in Africa. So I wanted the nation that had the most African cores to represent. But the next change to Africa definitely needs to be a formable in this region. Liberia is a starting nation, so giving them the ability to at least do something, I believe, would be the next priority for Africa. The next thing I would like to talk about is that it's time. Bubble Zest actually had a video that came out recently that it's time for Egypt to be a starting nation, and I'm in full agreement with him. Egypt really does need to be a starting nation, and it's not even just that it's like historically accurate that they were independent, like an independent nation since, I believe, 1922, but also just the fact that I believe it would help gameplay, because one of the reasons they stated was that, like, the UK struggled to protect them because they were a puppet, like they were part of they were an allied nation, not a what's the word I'm looking for, not a like direct just incorporated state they have. But at this point, with how they've changed the UK's prioritization, sometimes they don't even prioritize this all that well anyway, so at this point I don't think it's that harm done. I think having them as a starting nation to be able to have the base focus tree, you don't even need to give them content at this point. That would be nice and a great bonus, but just having them as on the map would be good, just because that would give them access to the base focus tree. And the base focus tree has infrastructure efforts, which this is 3 infrastructure, and this is another 3 with two so like half of them are going to, actually 2/3 will be going into an individual state, but it's 6 infrastructure. And if with it released, they actually do need to fix the thing where, like, you can get infrastructure in the unpassable terrain, so that's kind of a detriment. But 6 infrastructure in these states would be fantastic, especially if you get lucky and it's in these areas, because it gives more supply, which will help, because while it doesn't give a lot of supply, getting infrastructure from level 2 up to possibly even maxed out at level 5, depending on luck, will help out with supply and will help in the North African campaign. It also will make it easier for allies to build railways, which usually when I'm playing in the allies, I end up building a railway. I build a port in one of these 2 tiles, build a railway, connect it, and then I don't even have to be there. Usually once you do that, the AI gets enough supply to push Africa. So doing that, just giving Egypt as a releasable, I believe, would make that easier, just because they could get extra factories in this region, and they get extra infrastructure, and they could build their own troops, which they would use to protect this border, so there would at least always be a few troops on this border. Even if they only get out 4 or 5 units, that's enough to cover this until the UK or another allied nation gets its troops there to push. So I believe it's time for that. Besides that, not sure what else they could do. They could start adding more focus trees, but at this point, I think they just really need a formable for here, and I will be very satisfied, because with the United States of Latin Africa, this is a huge chunk that now has content. Even ignoring the focus tree for the Congo, which is a very good tree, I actually very much enjoy it. Everything in there was no reason to play any of these nations, because like Angola, the problem it had was it's a releasable of Portugal, but so was Mozambique. So if you wanted to play one or the other, pick Mozambique. You can do Mutapa. But now, I'd argue, depending on how the game goes, if you're playing alt history, you can play as Angola and get the United States of Latin America without having to deal with going to the war with the Allies. Now it'll take Belgium going a alt history path that doesn't have them join the Allies, and France being turned into Vichy France, and then you like join the Axis and declaring war on Vichy. But it can be done. I enjoy that. That being able to actually form a nation as a releasable where potentially you don't have to go to war with the Allies is always a plus. That's why the Horn of Africa can be okay, depending on how depending on how you can get some of the conflicts and stuff to work out. You can actually form the Horn of Africa without having to go to war with the Allies, which is always a plus. So giving this something would be fantastic. With these few small tweaks, I believe we actually will have Africa pretty well finished off for all intents and purposes, until they want to add focus trees and maybe a little bit extra to it. But pretty much that one single formable, I think, will finish it off, because while Sudan, Mali, Namibia, and Djibouti do not have anything, Mali is pretty easy if they ever want to add it to Mutapa or give it the ability to form East Africa. Pretty simple fix. Djibouti should already have Horn of Africa. It might just be an oversight that they didn't give it to it, and no one plays Djibouti, so it's not that. So they haven't really rushed out of their way to fix it. With Sudan, honestly, if they add Egypt is a releasable, giving them the ability to core Sudan through a decision or request occupation of Sudan. I'm not sure if they actually did control Sudan. I'm actually going to look that up real quick. One quick Google search later, and from what I got from a cursory glance, they had a treaty that was like a joint thing with the Anglo-Sudan territory, where technically they had control, and so did the United Kingdom. But because of how the United Kingdom basically had control of the government, and while they were technically independent, the UK had great exerted force on them. It realistically didn't, but it does give it where like Egypt easily could be able to core Sudan, so that would take care of Sudan, where it at least would be able to have stuff done with it. Sudan itself probably wouldn't have much, but it at least would cover most of the Sudanese territory to have something for it. So besides that, I believe that that leaves only this area that needs to be covered. And with the last DLC, they did something interesting where they gave us the Federal Republic of the Antilles, which to form it you need Cuba, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. You get the decision. You get a core on Jamaica, what is this? Puerto Rico. Yeah, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, these islands here, and then you also get a decision that you can integrate this and you can integrate this, which is it's a pretty decent formable. Gives Cuba some content, because in the last DLC they gave Hispaniola a formable, but not anything with Cuba, and people were kind of upset. They've rectified that, which is pretty good. But that gives me hope that they'll give us another formable in Africa, even if Africa's not the focus, because they've shown they're willing to just throw random formables in. Even with with By Blood alone, East Africa was kind of thrown in. There's nothing really tied with East Africa. I don't think realistically any of the what's it called? Any like focus trees in Ethiopia and such have anything to do with it. They did increase like Somalia's cores, where and Somalia is a big part of East Africa where they can integrate it and stuff, but like that's more just changes how things work, and then East Africa benefiting from that, than East Africa being actually part of that. So they've shown that they'll just throw in formable nations that don't necessarily have anything to do with what's going on. So hopefully they'll do that and give us something in this region. But that pretty much covers most of what I wanted to talk about and show with Africa of the state of that it's in and what needs to happen to it. So I'll thank you all for watching to the end of the video. If you could like, comment, and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.